Why do you eat what you eat? Have you ever thought about it? Have you ever really thought about why are you eating the foods that you eat? So, in case you don't know me, I'm Karin from Karinyogalife, and I am a certified yoga instructor based in Kingston, Jamaica, and just all-around wellness advocate. So today I'm talking about my favorite go-to foods, why I eat what I eat, and some of my principles behind why I eat. So there are basically 5 principles, 5 objectives that I have when I think about what I'm going to be eating. The first thing I always think about is I'm in my 50s. I know that once you're in your 50s, it starts to become more difficult for you to absorb the nutrients from the foods that you eat, the vitamins and minerals. So we really have to be a little bit more mindful about making sure that we get the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals from our foods. So we have to choose our foods a little bit more carefully. So the first goal or principle or objective that I have when I'm thinking about when I'm eating is how am I going to make sure that I get all the nutrition from the food that I need to get. Second of all, I do tend to have high blood pressure, so I try and think about what are the foods that I need to be eating in order to manage my tendency for high blood pressure. So this means foods that are high in potassium, magnesium, calcium, that are low in salt. So I really try and follow the DASH diet as much as I can. I've talked about that elsewhere, so I can put the link to that below. So I really am pretty mindful about eating to manage my tendency for high blood pressure. The other thing is I also have a tendency to have sinus issues, so I like to try and avoid dairy as much as I possibly can. And as you know, I have joint pains. I have various types of joint pains, arthritis or whatever it is, inflammation created joint pains. Not really sure what's creating them. They kind of come and go. So I definitely try and eat a diet that is going to not create more inflammation in my body, that's going to be anti-inflammatory and to help me to manage my joint pain. So the last principle goal that I have, obviously I love food. I want to enjoy what I'm eating. I want to eat yummy food, but I also realize that some of the foods that we eat are going to contribute to how we feel, going to contribute to us feeling good, or they're going to contribute to the opposite. But the other thing is, I also believe strongly that it's what we do most of the time that matters. It's what we do most of the time that matters. So if 80% of the time, 90% of the time, we're eating well, we're eating what foods that are going to make us feel good, we're laying off, all the foods that we know we shouldn't be eating too much of, but now and again we indulge, we have a couple too many glasses of whatever, or we have a big piece of cake, or we have a couple slices of pizza, whatever it is, I think it's fine. I think it's fine once in a while to just splurge, enjoy yourself, and I think that's really important to enjoying life. So I said I would talk a little bit also about how I manage my weight, because obviously that is another goal that I have, that I want to manage my weight. I don't want to gain weight. I did lose 15 to 20 pounds a couple of years ago, and I'm quite vigilant about making sure that I don't put the weight that I lost back on, because I know that being overweight also does contribute to lots of things that I'm trying to avoid. Joint pain, hypertension, lots of other things that I think we probably all know. So a couple of principles that I follow to manage my weight, which are pretty simple, really easy. Anybody can do it with a little concentration and focus. So the first thing is I really try to have half my plate being plants or vegetables at either lunch or dinner. So half the plate vegetables or plants, and then the other quarter some form of good protein, some form of complex carbohydrate. So my first principle is half my plate plants. And once you fill up half your plate with plants, that only leaves another half of the plate for all the other stuff. So I find that generally works for me, and I really try and stick to that pretty closely. So my other principle is that I really try and stay away from simple processed foods. So for my carbs, I generally try and stick to the complex carbs, stay away from the refined flour products, the white bread and the pastas and the white rice. Of course, as I just said, what you do most of the time is what matters. So if now and again, I want rice or I want pasta or I want bread, I definitely don't stop myself from having those things once in a while. But as a general rule, I tend to stick to the complex carbs. Then thirdly, I really try and have my main meal at lunchtime. I try and have my big meal at lunchtime. I try and have a light dinner. I do also have breakfast, although sometimes I'm not so good at the breakfast. So I try and have breakfast. I try and have my main meal at lunchtime and then a light dinner. Trying not to snack quite as much as I used to, but if I do snack, I try to snack on healthy things like fruits, nuts, try and stay away from the cookies and those kind of more snacky type foods. And then the last thing is portion size. I also try and manage my portions so that I can pretty much eat whatever I want to eat. I can eat whatever I want. I just have to try and not have humongous portions. So if I want a piece of pizza, I have one or two. I don't have 3 or 4 or 5, which I'm totally capable of eating if I was to let myself. So those are really the key principles that I use to manage my weight. And they work for me. I definitely fall off sometimes, and I have days when I totally just, splurge and eat whatever I want, and I'm not so good. And then I just basically try and get back onto the program the next day. Try not to beat myself up. Try not to feel guilty about it. I just get back on it the next day. So I hope that helps. And before I go into my top 10 list of foods I can't live without, I'm just going to share that I really, really believe in food as your medicine, or as I've seen it put somewhere else, your kitchen as your pharmacy. So if there's one thing you can remember from today, it's to think about why you're eating what you're eating. Think about your food as your medicine, your kitchen as your pharmacy, and let's all try and be a little bit more mindful about what we eat and why we're eating what we're eating. Maybe you already are already, which is great, but I know I need to remind myself quite regularly. So I'm going to go through these in kind of the order of the day, what I would eat going through the day, and this is by no means a fully exhaustive list. These are just the top 10 that I'm currently eating, because this is kind of an update to a post I did a couple of years ago. And when I reviewed it, some things are the same and some things are a little bit different. So firstly, in the morning, of course, number one thing, I cannot get out of bed, I cannot leave the house without coffee. So I am a complete coffee addict. I don't drink too much of it, but I definitely drink at least 1 or 2 cups in the morning. And luckily here in Jamaica, we have awesome coffee. So I definitely have coffee on my list, and thankfully coffee has been shown to have some nutritional benefits. Of course, we don't want to be drinking 5, 6 cups of coffee a day, but I think to have 1 or 2 cups of good coffee in the morning is probably good for you. Is at least, hope I'm addicted, so that's what I start my day off with, is coffee. And after that, I will generally have some type of fruit for my breakfast. I love bananas, so I have a lot of bananas. I sometimes put them in smoothies. I make oats smoothies, so oats are also on my list of my top 10 foods. Super easy, oats, bananas, some form of liquid in my blender, and that is my breakfast many days. As I mentioned before, I'm not super great at having a balanced breakfast. It's generally a good idea to have some form of protein with breakfast. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Oats is protein, but I'm not always so great with the breakfast protein. So, so those are the top 4 for the day so far: coffee, bananas, oats, and what did I say? So for my liquid, as I mentioned, I am trying to stay off of dairy because of my sinus. So I have switched almost completely to oat milk. And I wanted to share with you my favorite brand of oat milk, which is Minor Figures oat milk. I love it. This is recently introduced in Jamaica in the last couple of years. Honestly, it's the best tasting oat milk that I've had, and I've tried many of them. So if you haven't tried Minor Figures oat milk, it really is yummy. It goes great in coffee, goes great in cereals. It's a perfect substitute for regular milk. Try it for yourself and see if you like it, but I don't think I could ever go back to drinking regular milk. So that is definitely on my list of the top 10 foods that I could not live without: Minor Figures oat milk. Then after that, sweet potatoes is always on my list. I generally have sweet potato almost every day, either for lunch or dinner. As I mentioned, I try and stay away from the simple carbs, the crackers, the bread, the cookies. And so I try and use either yam or sweet potato as my carb. I'm going to show you what I do. I know this looks kind of silly, but I usually cut up my sweet potato like this, so it kind of looks like a cracker, and I use these as a substitute for crackers. So you can put stuff on it, you can eat it by itself. They're kind of like thick, chips, or a little thicker, but these are really good. You just bake the sweet potato in the oven, and they can double as crackers. They can even double as chips. They're really yummy. So if you never tried that, I encourage you to try sweet potato crackers, I call them. For my protein, I generally stick to either chicken or fish. I love sardines. Again, super easy. I eat sardines a lot, mush them up, make a kind of a spread out of them, or I put them in salads. So that's my sort of go-to fish protein. And of course, us Jamaicans, we love our chicken. So chicken, chicken, chicken. I probably eat too much chicken, but what can I tell you? I'm Jamaican. We love our chicken. So for protein, I generally try and stick to chicken or fish. I don't eat a whole lot of meat. I really don't like it that much. I've never been a big beef eater or meat eater in general, and I find that I'm eating less and less meat as I get older. I just don't feel for it. I tend to eat beans a lot as another protein source. I pretty much love all types of beans. I love black beans, I love lentils, I love split peas. I love beans in pretty much all forms. My husband makes an amazing hummus. I'll share the recipe for his hummus. So I definitely eat a lot of beans as my protein. So not that I have anything against eating, moderate amounts of meat, but I generally just don't eat a lot of meat. And I wanted to share another cool product that we have here in Jamaica, which is these veggie burgers. They're called Veg Out. These are the black bean burgers. Again, super easy. I put them in our George Foreman grill. You just pop them in 2 tubes. They're ready. Stick them, you can have them in a bun, or you can have them by themselves, or you could probably even put these between 2 of my sweet potato crackers, and they're actually really yummy. They come in a bunch of different varieties, and I eat these quite a lot. So those are my proteins. Of course, I believe in nuts a lot. I eat a lot of nuts. I make my own granola, which is a super easy recipe. Generally has almonds and walnuts and pumpkin seeds. That is something else I actually have for breakfast a lot, is granola, my own homemade granola. So I will share that recipe too. And of course, that full of nuts. I generally omit the sugar because my recipe calls for some type of sugar, but I usually don't, and I just use a little bit more fruit, like raisins or cranberries. Works perfectly. It's very sweet, perfectly sweet enough for me. And then the last thing on my top 10 list is coconut water. Love coconut water. Luckily I live in Jamaica. Again, we can get coconut water, fresh coconut water here, and it's loaded with potassium, really good for me because of my tendency to high blood pressure. So I generally try and drink quite a lot of coconut water, as much as I can. So that is my top 10 list of my favorite foods. I would love to hear what's on your list, even if it's not 10. Just to recap, food as your medicine. Think about what we're eating. Let's think about what we're trying to achieve with what we're eating. And remember, it's what you eat most of the time that matters.